focusing more on maintaining our own balance than on getting where we're trying to go. That will be a kind of consequence of the way that we take steps. Hi, I'm Grant from Darsana Martial Arts. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to support us or join our online academy, there are links in the description. All right, let's get to the lesson. This is Tao Te Ching chapter 15 from Red Pine's translation. The great masters of ancient times focused on the indiscernible and penetrated the dark. You would never know them. And because you wouldn't know them, I describe them with reluctance. They were careful, as if crossing a river in winter, cautious, as if worried about neighbors, reserved like a guest, ephemeral like melting ice, simple like uncarved wood, open like a valley, and murky like a puddle. But those who can be like a puddle become clear when they're still, and those who can be at rest become alive when they are roused. Those who treasure this way don't try to be seen. Not trying to be seen, they can hide and stay hidden. We're going to go through that line by line and unpack it a bit. The great masters of ancient times. Usually you'll hear something like the great masters, the sages, ancient kings. All of these are meant to imply an imagined ideal of those from some time long ago who were able to cultivate within themselves and embody Tao. So the notion is those who so fully aligned themselves with the way that everything about them was an embodiment of that way, exuded that way. What then follows is a description of how they were. They focused on the indiscernible and penetrated the dark. The indiscernible and the dark could just very well be a description of Tao. The idea is that Tao is not something that can be measured, it can't be seen, yet its effect is in everything. It underlies all things. So we could refer to it simply as the unknown, unmanifest potential of all being, and also the way in which that potential manifests into being. Saying that they focused on that and penetrated the dark is to say that they didn't concentrate on the sort of external and the obvious. They didn't concentrate on the manifest shape of things, but rather looked deep into the underlying nature of themselves and of all things within the world. And doing so, penetrated into that dark space of the unknown. This is why it follows up by saying you would never know them. But to say you would never know them, I think, is to say that you wouldn't recognize one passing them on the street. Because the thing with Tao is it has no outward form. It's within all forms. So it appears to be ordinary. It doesn't appear to be anything special. And so the masters and the sages also didn't appear to be doing anything special. And yet if you watched them closely over time, in a long enough period of time, you would just see that somehow there was something subtle at work in everything that they did that had a kind of effect on the world around them, or rather that seemed to mitigate the effect of, say, chaotic experiences on them. Right? So they were able to sort of navigate life in the world in a way that, when carefully observed, would reveal itself to be something deep and somewhat extraordinary, but on the surface of things, you would never notice. Because you wouldn't know them, I describe them with reluctance. So this kind of gets into the general notion that you hear often from a kind of Taoist perspective. Those who know do not say, and those who say do not know. What this really means is that you cannot actually describe the indescribable. You cannot measure the infinite by definition. And so the reluctance to describe or say anything is drawing attention to the fact that no description, no way of explaining or defining anything can ever really get to its true nature. I could describe to you the molecular structure of water, but that doesn't quench your thirst. It's saying that the important thing is a direct experience. Recently, We talked about the Neye, which was translated by Harold Roth in his book, The Original Tao, which potentially predates the Tao Te Ching and focuses on the kind of meditative cultivation of Tao within the self. And it gets precisely to this notion that it is something that must be directly experienced. We use Tai Chi Chuan as a vehicle to have that experience. It says, they were careful as if crossing a river in winter. Now, I think this could be understood from two slightly different but perhaps related and overlapping perspectives. One is a kind of patience. If, for example, it's a large river or a deep river or has a strong current, it can be something very, very difficult to cross and dangerous to do so. So, Master wouldn't try to force his agenda when circumstances are not proper for that. Rather, he would wait for nature to take its course and create an opportunity for him to cross the river when it is the right time. We can see this in our practice, particularly in partner practice, like push hands, in which we're in contact with a partner and we're oscillating back and forth with motion, force, and energy between the two of us, sort of like an energetic ping pong match, right? When we're doing that, it's very easy to want to force your agenda. Maybe if you're doing a freestyle push hands with a partner, the agenda seems to be that you want to unbalance or uproot the other person, take them out of their position in that game. But the truth is that that's never something we want to try to make happen, nor is it something that we completely disengage from, but rather by staying in contact with it, by staying aware, alert, and highly conscious, and listening carefully to what we feel. The opportunity for that to happen while maintaining our own balance will reveal itself, and we almost just follow that rather than try to manufacture it. The other way, perhaps, of understanding this is the way that you might cross a frozen river very, very cautiously, because the ice could very easily crack and break and you could fall in. So very much like a cat who carefully tests the surface it's going to walk on before it commits to it. A master's steps would be very conscious, very deliberate, likely very slow. And in that way, we can see this carefulness within our form in the fact that we always step empty. We never step with committed weight. The foot always reaches out hollow. It touches and contacts the ground with sensitivity. And then we gradually pour our structure, our weight, our density. We fill that leg gradually until it sort of little by little becomes fully the supporting structure for us before moving the next leg. So we can see this as a way of navigating all things in life, never rushing in to get a result or accomplish a goal, but rather taking our time, watching carefully for the way that whatever it is we're engaging with reacts to what we're doing, and focusing more on maintaining our own balance than on getting where we're trying to go. That will be a kind of consequence of the way that we take steps. Cautious as if worried about neighbors. This one I thought was an interesting one. So when you're cautious as if worried about neighbors, you don't live your life in a highly public way. You don't make a spectacle of yourself so that everybody can watch and gossip and misinterpret the things that you're doing and come up with their own stories, or simply just have a general kind of narrative about you. Rather, your life is very much kept internal. You don't show much of that, at least not in the way that one might, to try to get attention. You're quite the opposite. You're not attention seeking, but rather focused inward and not concerned so much about the opinion of others. You stay sort of within yourself. You focus internally on your own inner world and inner life. I can't remember who said this quote, but there was a quote I came across the other day, and it was something like, "Live a beautiful life and tell no one. People destroy beautiful things." It kind of reminded me of this notion of having a quiet gratefulness for what you do have in your life, not making a spectacle of it. Reserved like a guest. I think this one gets to the heart of Taoist perspective. To be reserved like a guest in the world, in your life, it's like you enter into circumstances not as if you own the place. You never demand more than is offered. You are grateful and well-mannered and appreciative of that which is offered. And you are careful not to disrupt the natural flow of things around you. You kind of want everything and everyone to go about in the way that they would ordinarily go about. You don't want to, by factor of your presence, disturb what's going on. You don't want to damage anything. You want to be there and you want to be able to experience and appreciate it, but without disrupting it. It's almost like if you were going to observe some form of wildlife and you wanted to observe them exactly as they behave, then you would want them to know you're observing them. You would want them to just be able to carry on. So you're there and you're among them, but in a manner that is unobtrusive. And so the Taoist perspective is to be unobtrusive and not try to, make ripples or be recognized or affect the things around you, but rather to act as a guest would act. Grateful for the opportunity to be there, well-mannered and open-hearted, understanding and unobtrusive. And in Tai Chi, we see this again back in partner practice. We don't want our presence to be something that is obstructive to our partner. We don't want to stand in their way. We don't want to force them to move in a way that they're not moving. Likewise, we're not running away or ignoring them. We're attending, we're following, we're blending with them in such a way that our movement, our actions, and our presence is congruent with theirs. We harmonize with them. And it's actually through that harmonization that the opportunities to maintain our balance and perhaps unbalance them come about. As a matter of fact, we're not even really unbalancing them. They're unbalancing themselves. We just remain in balance. And in doing so in that interaction, whatever is going to happen with them was more or less going to happen anyways. We just almost become a mirror for what's going on with them. And that's a challenging thing to do because our own emotions kind of come up. So to achieve this kind of state, you also have something of an emotional calm, a slight detachment, not a total disinterest, but like a guest, you're not necessarily involved in the drama that's unfolding and going on. You're able to remain in a kind of repose while whatever unfolds around you unfolds. Ephemeral like melting ice. So in our practice, I often say, don't hold shape. Don't be rigid. Don't grip on with the muscles. Even in still postures, we're not holding shape. Actually, internally, it is changing constantly as we refine our alignment, are able to release more deeply, and able to increase circulation of motion and force and energy inside of us. So what this means is we never rigidly hold a position, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, socially, circumstantially. We are able to change and adapt because we're always changing and adapting anyways. The equilibrium that we seek to attain when we talk about returning to Wuji or when we stand in Wuji is not a rigid equilibrium, but a living one, like a boat moored at dock that slightly shifts and changes with the movements of the water. Simple like uncarved wood. Sometimes this is referred to as pu, the uncarved block. This means that we are not contrived. In the same way that we don't hold a shape, we don't carve ourselves into something fancy, externally making an impression, but rather we remain in a kind of raw, authentic naturalness. We allow whatever sort of natural virtue is within us to emerge and exude outward. We don't try to turn ourselves into something to make an impression. We allow it to be what it is. We allow ourselves to be what they are. And so to be an uncarved block, let's say in our Tai Chi practice, is not to focus on the external fancy shape of our movement, but rather to allow the internal motion to create that shape from the inside out. So the shape is an expression of what is within rather than the other way around. Open like a valley. A valley's openness makes it receptive. It isn't full and expressive. It has an emptiness that allows the rain that falls on the high ground to gather into the bottom, makes the land fertile, makes it grow, makes it a good place to be. So in the same way, when we are receptive, we create an opportunity for things to accrue to us rather than chasing after them or being bold in some way to go out and try to get them. We are receptive to what's going on. We allow that to flow into us. In Tai Chi practice, again, particularly let's say in partner practice, we want to align, open, and sink emptying out the density within us. And what this does is it creates somewhere for another person's force to go. When somebody pushes on us, that force doesn't find something to push against, but like the rainwater, it flows down to the bottom. So when we cultivate that in our solo practice, we release that tension, we allow everything to sink to the bottom, and then movement can flow and grow out of the bottom in the same way that things grow from the valley. And we can redirect that in the same way the valley redirects the flow of water. Murky like a puddle. Okay, so this one is a little interesting. But I think it means that we have depth that cannot immediately be recognized. That what we focus on is internal, and it isn't something that someone sees at a glance, like what we talked about in the beginning. Same in our practice, we often say that somebody watching us practice only sees a fraction of what we're doing. You can only see the surface. You can't see what's going on inside. This is why the notion of direct transmission in Tai Chi is one that has to be passed often through actual physical contact, through touch. This is what that means. Or even just being in the room with the teacher and kind of feeling the way they're moving, not just seeing it. This is very important. Likewise, what's happening on the inside can only really be understood if we choose to engage with someone and bring them into that or reveal that. But then it goes on to say, but those who can be like a puddle become clear when they are still. So in our practice and in our lives, it's not activity that brings clarity. That would just stir up the dirt in the water and make it just that much more cloudy. Rather, it's when we still ourselves and let all that mental, emotional activity settle down that we gain clarity. And again, this is something that's talked about in the Neye, in internal cultivation, when we talk about sitting and being still. And there's more verses in the Tao Te Ching that refer to this. So when we start class in the beginning and we stand in Wu Ji, we're not just holding a posture, not just even physically. It's like I said earlier, we're allowing the heart fire to settle down into the dantian. We're letting our emotions calm down. We're disengaging from overactive thinking, and we're allowing the mind to suffuse through the body and gather in the center. This is a state in which we become clearer because this sort of quiet wisdom that is within all of us isn't drowned out by all the noise of our desires and concerns. Those who can be at rest become alive when they are roused. I said earlier that Wu Ji is not rigid stillness, but a stillness that is full of potential for motion. It is an unmanifest potential for action in any direction. That means we don't rest in a kind of unconscious heavy way, but we rest in a restful readiness for whatever may come. So the moment we're touched, the moment we have an intention or something externally engages with us, the whole field of our being immediately becomes dynamic and is roused into motion. Not because we have a particular agenda, but because that's what happens, as when you drop a pebble in water and it generates ripples. The water was always ready to ripple. It was never rigid. It was just waiting for something to initiate it. Finally, it said, those who treasure this way don't try to be seen, not trying to be seen, they can hide and stay hidden. In other words, that which you are and that what you do is not something that is contrived, manufactured for external observation or to make an impression on someone. The true nature of you remains hidden within, and it's only revealed by an interaction with whatever it is you're engaging with. This is why the masters wouldn't be known if you passed them on the street. They're not making a show of it. They're not wearing special robes or a badge or a hat or something that reveals what they are. What they are is only revealed through what they do. And even that is something very soft, very quiet, and just not at all aimed at making an impression. And so it is with the Tao. That's why the Tao is not noticeable, because it's in everything, the sort of quiet nature of things, that when we can tune into it and align ourselves to it, can guide everything that we do. And so you can't use it up, as earlier chapters have said.